Okay. Yeah, welcome to Work Package T1. We will introduce you a little bit to what has been the basis in the AlpES project. And there we started very from the ground onwards, what would be the most framing and basic questions we will have. I think this doesn't work. Okay. So, the first question is, why do we need a common understanding? And the slide shows you the different entities in the Alpine space. So we have a lot of different societal expectations, and this means we need a common understanding from the different cultures we have, in particular because this is a very scientific concept. So what have we done then in this project Work Package T1? We asked for a common understanding. We looked for what are the framework for mapping and assessment, what are instruments, and what are about stakeholder involvement, and we get into the opinions of the stakeholders. The next step we did was to have an analysis of a common understanding in the Alpine countries. So we started from the development of a questionnaire when we had some key questions for the project partners. We had a compilation of the key messages in the framework, which has been then the basis for the stakeholder involvement. And to give you a flavor of what we did, what are the frequently asked questions for a common understanding? So one is, of course, what is considered as an ecosystem service? And the pictures show you what most of us think. This is this orchard meadow here, but is it also hydropower, just the existence of water? Or is it what is the human co-production, or do we have also technical support? So this led to the main topics of a common understanding, starting from definition of ecosystem services, about use of final and intermediate ecosystem services, the role of biodiversity, for instance, and as well the question for supply and demand in different ecosystems. What has been then the framework for a mapping and assessment if you want to do that job? So this picture show you that the mapping is the basis for an understanding of the ecosystem assessment, and the ecosystem assessment is then the basis for the ecosystem service assessment, showing you where are the characteristics of the ecosystems. Mapping options strive across, let's say, 3 tiers or 3 levels, from the mapping with available data, expert judgments, towards the use of different indicators, and then using also models for ecosystem service mapping. One of the key questions we had is, are there typical Alpine ecosystem services? And of course, there are ecosystem services over everywhere, but some, like the protection against natural hazards, like here avalanches, are very typical for Alpine areas, as well as the provision of water or the perception of landscapes. How to select now these ecosystem services from about 94 ecosystem services which are collected in the CISIS catalog. This shows you that we have selected 8 ecosystem services which are typical for the Alpine area, and they can be used for our approach. How to implement this ecosystem services, this concept? Basically, we try to see what are formal instruments existing already in the different areas and what are informal instruments. And we found that the informal instruments might have the better option to be introduced. So an example for such an instrument is the planning cell used in the German-speaking countries, where you have basically the empowerment of people to change processes. This is the main characteristic of this sort of instrument. What we did is we had a big collection of instruments. We collected about 154 instruments in a big table, and this big table is linked to a fact sheet where you find all the main or most important information about these different implementation instruments. We also try to have a permanent stakeholder involvement throughout the whole process of the AlpES project, starting with stakeholder involvement in the single work packages, then having pilot region involvements and talking to stakeholders there, having national training days, having transnational workshop, and now what we are in the final conference. We developed also a guideline for stakeholder involvement, showing what are the different steps to get stakeholders involved, and we also prepared different slideshows to involve stakeholders in this different talks. So finally coming to an end, what are some preliminary conclusions we could point out? And I think the chances in the middle are the most interesting ones. It is important to have that there's a big potential to have a stronger use of demand and flow, and also that the ecosystem concept might be a common framework for decision making, as it was indicated in the morning sessions. So what will be the output of our work package? We will have a booklet which is translated in all of the languages. Alice, I'm promising this will come until December, containing all of the different main key findings of the project. Further steps we could do, and this is the final outlook, is there could be a spatial resolution of ecosystem services below the municipal level. There could be an economic valuation as an additional tool, not the only one, it's an additional impact, and a further implementation in a regional, really regional environmental governance. Thank you for listening.
Now we'll come to the second express presentation. And here you start.
Okay, as you know, we have a lot of ecosystem services in Alpine space, provisional, regulating, and cultural services in a very dense spatial area. And to map and assess these was really a challenge in some ways. So for the AlpES project, we mapped 8 ecosystem services: grassland biomass, drinking water, fuel, water filtration, CO2 sequestration, and natural hazard mitigation, and also outdoor recreation and symbolic alpine species we saw before. And to do that, we applied we worked at 2 different scales, and we applied 2 approaches, basically a transnational approach and a regional approach with 9 test regions. And as a result, we had this the municipal scale, and also in some for some ecosystem services also a raster scale up to 25 meters. We pursued a multi-indicator approach, mapping supply, flow, and demand. And to explain these 3 terms, I will use the example of grassland biomass in this case. So supply would be how much grass is growing on the pastures and meadows in the Alpine space. Demand would be how much grass is actually needed by the livestock, all the livestock in the Alpine space, to how much are they actually in need in terms of sustenance. And lastly, we looked also at the flow, which would be the share of the provided ecosystem service and the demand. So how much is actually being cut on the Alpine meadows and grasslands and or grazed by livestock in these areas. We had also we had different possibilities also to map and assess ecosystem service. So there are different tier approaches, using just statistical data for some or others, but basically we wanted to get at a biophysical value for each ecosystem service we mapped. So we used mainly the tier 3 approach, combining different data sources and models to get at one biophysical value. And to stay coherent within the project, also the work has been done by many people. We needed a harmonized approach also that can also be transferred to possible stakeholders using a harmonized approach. So the result of our work package was then more than 20 ecosystem service indicator maps, and they were then also put together in one short report. So we gave them more context and some interpretation help for people interested in it. And we added as additional information also more than 30 sustainability indicators covering the topics of society, economy, and environment. They are also all accessible on the WebGIS and in the wiki. And now I give you also some example of single results. Here you have a supply indicator, the site protecting forest in the Alpine space. It makes it's a regulating service, so it hasn't been quantified that often, but it is, yeah. Please just look at the map, so it's very difficult to interpret them in this short time. Here you see the nitrogen removals. These are mainly also connected to the emission of nitrogen, so especially the agricultural areas in the peripheral Alps stick out, I mean, if you look at the map. And here an example for a demand indicator, grassland biomass. How much feed energy is required to sustain all the livestock in the Alpine space. Also here you see the milk and meat producing regions and municipalities very well. Additional uses of the map can not only look at single indicators but also comparing them. So if you compare supply and demand, you can, for some cases, find very well the service providing areas and the service benefiting areas. Here for drinking water, comparing supply and flow, for example, here for fuel wood, you can identify where there is still an untapped potential, where is more use than being provided. So how, in the case of fuel wood, how much, where more is used than regrowth. And finally, you could also compare all three of them, look at all three of them, and then get a picture of how really the services are being used from all angles. So how much is provided, how much is actually used, and how much is needed. And yeah, that was all.
Right. 20 seconds. Okay, so work package 3, it's going to be a very technical presentation, unfortunately for you, since this is mainly about the WebGIS. So we had the analysis, the data model, and also the implementation of the WebGIS as part of our work package. So this is it. That's an openly accessible platform, mapping tool, and a GIS tool for visualizing all the outputs of the AlpES projects on a nice map interface. You can see on the left-hand side you've got a layer structure where you can actually select the layer you want to display. On the top right you have various user interface controls where you can change the language. The whole interface is actually available in the 5 languages like English, German, Italian, Slovenian and French, and you can have some basic coordinate readout tools as well available to actually further look at the data and the coordinates you are actually looking at. You can change the projection if you have specific local projections in your test area. We've got 20 ecosystems indicator, 30 sustainability indicators, some background thematic layers like land cover, and some other like administrative and digital and elevation model layers in here. So in total 70 layers. Something very basic, we can change the background map from a very dull black and white map to a more sophisticated topographic map, and also a background map where we have the satellite background. For any feature, we can identify the feature and we can interrogate the actual numbers of that feature. For example, on here we can see the supply of fuel wood, of grassland, which can then actually be forwarded to the Wiki Alps project where we can, WikiAlp's wiki, where we can then see more information about the actual parameter, and we can also look at the metadata, and we've got a nice explanation of what this, this sustainability indicator or eco-services indicator actually means. We also have a search tool where we can search for specific areas and places, and then the user can actually be taken straight to the area he wants to find. So there's a little bit of a user guidance here as well. We do have a print functionality or a PDF export functionality where the maps can actually be exported and used in further presentations for the stakeholders or for the general public. So generally a good communications tool. But it's not only PDF output, we can also download the data, the actual ecosystem services indicator values and the sustainability indicator values, which can then be exported to CSV files and then further on be analyzed in Microsoft Excel or any other spreadsheet program. In terms of interoperability, not only data export but also map export is possible. So if you've got your own GIS like QGIS or like ArcGIS, you can actually go and bring these layers into your own GIS for further analysis and for further illustration. And as I said before, this is possible both for the for open source GIS tools as well as for ArcGIS using OGC web mapping services. So what else do we offer? You might think there is a little bit of a constraint here because we do have a certain set of parameters. But what about population density, for example? Is this something you want to calculate or normalize maybe against the area or the population of a certain unit? So we have come up with a calculation tool where you can actually do some basic algebra with the indicators you have available. You can drag and drop the indicators into this formula box and then define various styling and normalization rules. And voila, what the user can see then is, for example, here, I think it's the average population density in the municipalities. So a very useful tool to actually play around with, come up with your own indicators, or maybe you want to recalculate your indicators. To properly introduce these functionalities to the user, we have an on-screen guidance and on-screen help, where various elements are actually further explained to the user. But we also have WebGIS documentation on the wiki, including, for example, how you use the calculation tool, which mathematical operators are possible, how you use the measurement tool, and so on. And last but not least, all of this is available in a PDF as well, encapsulating all the features which can then given to the end users. So that's me for this presentation. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I want to present to you quickly the work package 54, the capacity building model. So, concerning the working stack, we have the work package 54 was divided in these activities. The first activity, the synthesis of stakeholder feedback obtained in the work package T1, T2, and T3. The second activity, the development of the capacity building model. And the third activity is the dissemination and training event. The main goal of the first activity was to understand and summarize the stakeholder needs and gaps coming from the interview of the work package T1, T2, and T3. This understanding has been realized with aims of supporting and evaluating large-scale change initiative and to sustain the interest of the involved stakeholder. 14 interviewers have been involved in this stakeholder meeting by all the 10 project partners. The second activity is the capacity building model. What is the capacity building model? Because really there are few sources that provide a definition of capacity building. This is a new concept used by no-profit organizations working in the development of human resource capacity at a national or international level. Just a quick view of some definition. The first one of the Global Development Research Centers, and he says that capacity building is much more than trainings and includes the following: human resource development, organizational development, and institutional and legal framework development. Another definition, Agenda 21 for the United Nations. Capacity building encompasses the country's human, scientific, technological, organizational, and resource capability. In general, we say that capacity building exceeds a simple training procedure and goes beyond enhancing personal skills to involve the organization and even more the surrounding context in which the individual operates, increasing the overall capacity to reach the expected goal. What is the relationship between AlpES and the capacity building? We can say that the capacity building model consists in a series of activities that aim to increase positive conditions in order to increase knowledge of ecosystem services and use them correctly in the mediation process with the stakeholder. In the step of the development of the capacity building, we want to focus with two activities of the capacity building: the learning tool and the dissemination and training event. AlpES has created an e-learning platform, a web platform accessible at this address, alpeselearning.eu. It is an online course based on the AlpES output, tailored for different categories of users and features for the self-learning activity. You have the possibility to know and access the AlpES materials in an interactive way, and all the contents are translated in all the languages of the Alpine space. What are the content present in the platform? You can find, first of all, text, videos, some infographics dedicated and created for the e-learning platform, and some links with WebGIS and WikiAlps were available. A quick screenshot of the e-learning platform. So this is, we think, very user-friendly because just clicking with the mouse and scrolling inside the platform, you can read all the contents, and you can move between between the modules, the training modules. Concerning the learning customization, the learning platform enables the users in period choosing the level of learning, not just on the basis of their knowledge, but also concerning in which way they are interested about ecosystem services. So you can find a basic level, an intermediate level, and an advanced level. If you have any doubt about your knowledge, a series of introductory questions suggest what is the most appropriate level for the stakeholder. Otherwise, you have an overview of all the modules inside the e-learning. And at the end of each module, you can verify your learning level. You can find a button at the end, and you have a sort of evaluation of the training. Concerning the activity 3, dissemination training event, AlpES has carried out many events of dissemination, specifically the one-day trainings and the transnational workshop. One-day trainings were organizing the providing interactive training session where participants carried out activities tailored to cope with specific local and regional situations and needs. All the trainings were in the local language of each partner. And concerning the transnational workshop, they aim to present AlpES methodology, results and output in order to address the participants toward the understanding about how to use ecosystem services for the decision making in environment management and the territorial development, even to regional example in Alpine space. Thank you.